ActionSA voted in favour of the 2025 fiscal framework in the National Assembly, helping the ANC get the crucial numbers. But the party has said it's opposed to any increase in VAT and the stealth tax of a personal income. ActionSA says that it recommended changes to the fiscal framework rather than amending it outright, as this would have required the Finance Minister to redo the entire budget process. We are now joined by ActionSA's parliamentary leader, Athol Trollip, to discuss this. Athol, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. Speak to us about how this process unfolded, the moment that the ANC started having the conversation with the ActionSA to say, will you be supporting this budget? How did you get to that point?
Thanks very much, Aldrin. I think what's important to understand is that the budget was supposed to have been tabled on the 19th of February. Then the minister was proposing a 2% tax hike or 2 percentage points increase in VAT. That was rejected by the GNU, I gather roundly by all the parties, including some members of the ANC. The budget tabling was then aborted, and 21 days later, the minister came back and tabled a budget on the 12th of March, where the VAT was increased by 0.5 basis points, or 0.5%. Now, that was also rejected by one of the main members of the GNU, the Democratic Alliance, and 21 days later, we arrived yesterday, where we had to vote on the fiscal framework. Now, obviously, the DA and the ANC could not find each other on this, and what we find really curious is that they've been in the GNU together for 9 months, and one would have thought that this needle would have been threaded between all of them as GNU partners, but clearly it wasn't, and they weren't making any headway, which led to the ANC coming to speak to us because we had a very important casting vote in the Finance Committee. And their commitment to us was that they can't redo the whole budget. It'll take too long. There's already too much uncertainty, insecurity, global attention, and we've seen the value of the rand tumble over this last 42 days. The budget has been delayed by 42 days. We've seen the value of our rand go down by 1.2% against the rand, 1.2% against the pound, and yesterday it fell even more. So, Aldrin, we said to the ANC, look, this is your mess. This is a GNU mess. It's not our mess. But we will support the fiscal framework on condition that you accept our recommendations. And our recommendations are that we believe that there's enough revenue in the fiscus to fund the shortfall, which is around 28 billion. Let's call it 30 billion rand, rather than increasing VAT and having the stealth tax, which is a non-inflation adjusted taxation. So the ANC committed. They said they'll accept that because that doesn't mean that the budget has to be redone entirely. And we've said they must go and find ways to fund it. Now, yesterday was a really important day because SARS tabled a report saying that they'd collected a record 1.855 trillion rand, which was 8.8 billion rand more than they anticipated and 114 billion rand more than the year before. Now, we convinced the minister to increase the allocation to SARS by 4 billion rand, which means SARS is now more capacitated and able to go and collect money. And we believe that's where the solution lies, not with taxing poor South Africans who are already against the ropes. Use SARS, which is the main revenue generating machine in this country, to find the budget shortfall. It is a paltry 28 billion rand out of a budget of over 2 trillion rand.
Yeah. Okay. So this issue around commitment, is your understanding as ActionSA that while you've made this recommendation, that the ANC will see it through based on their word solely, not necessarily that recommendation would be binding?
Look, there's a lot of speculation, first of all, about whether the recommendation is binding in law and what can be done. I want to remind you and all the listeners that, or viewers, that this is an unprecedented situation. South Africa's never been in this situation, certainly not in the last 30 years, and perhaps not even for the last 70 years, because previously the governments have all been majority hegemonic governments that simply made determinations around the budget. Now we have a situation where the government needs support from other parties, either from coalition partners or other parties in Parliament, which we saw happen yesterday. So, yeah, it's uncharted territory. The minister can, I believe, gazette a legislation to say that the proposed VAT hike will be postponed, or that it will not be implemented because they've now found additional revenue. And we have said, let's use this month before VAT actually kicks in. And that's what the viewers must understand. As soon as the minister tabled that budget with a 0.5% VAT increase, it meant that in a month's time it would come into effect. Now, the DA has been opposing it, and all the other parties that voted against this fiscal framework yesterday opposed it. If they'd opposed it and the minister had to go back and redo the budget, that would have been implemented on the 1st of May. We are now saying, here's a pragmatic approach and a pragmatic solution. Go and find the revenue, come back to South Africa and Parliament and say, we have found the additional revenue. SARS has collected more money than we anticipated. We are going to adjust our expenditure patterns. There are a whole host of expenditure reviews that have been tabled in Parliament that have been ignored for years. Go there, find the recommendations, implement those, find the money, and come back to Parliament and say, we've now found this money, we're not going to implement VAT. This is a time that requires pragmatism and putting people first and not parochial party interests. And we've seen too much politicking in this matter. We want South Africa's economy to start growing, and we want to move forward without expecting poor people to pay for the incompetence and poor government of the current GNU government.
Yeah, but Athol, you must accept, though, that on the basis of the interpretation of the Money Bills Amendment and Procedure and Related Matters Act, that recommendation does not necessarily mean it is binding, that it will be implemented. It is merely a recommendation. Yesterday, for instance, we spoke to the chairperson of the Financial Fiscal Commission, Dr. Nombeko Mbava, who says that there are only two options. It's either you accept and adopt the report as it is, or you make the amendments. And recommendations, yes, you can make the recommendations, but the executive can come back and say that, geez, we looked at the suggestions that you've made, but we still come back to the same scenario where we believe that a 0.5% VAT increase is necessary. Sure, we might cancel the 0.5% VAT increase next year, but for this year, it is necessary.
All right, there are two mights that you've mentioned there. They might come back and say that there is no money and we're going to carry on and implement it. Or they might come back and say there is money. The fact of the matter is there are too many mights here. We've never reached this situation before. There are a whole lot of different interpretations. We have a Minister of Finance who came and tabled a budget. It was his decision. He brought it to Parliament, even though there was opposition in his own party. Therefore, he can change that as far as we believe.
Sure.
And if we are really determined to find a solution to this impasse, which has been created by the fact that the GNU and all of its partners could not reach a decision on this budget. If we want to find a solution together as South Africans, I believe we can find a solution.
Okay.
If you want
let me ask you the question this way. Are recommendations binding according to your interpretation?
Recommendations from a committee report that goes to Parliament, and Parliament endorses the report with the recommendations we believe should be binding. And we are pushing the ANC who came to us...
Should be binding or is binding? Because recommendations is I make a suggestion. Where do you find it in legislation that recommendation can actually be binding?
Eldrin, there are a number of parties that are already saying they're going to take this matter to court. They must take it to court, let courts make a decision. For you to ask me whether I believe my recommendation is binding...
No, what they're taking to court is the procedure that led to the adoption of the report, not necessarily what was going to happen on the 1st of May. Yes, they're trying to block that, but not necessarily your recommendation is not being challenged. That's not the case. But what I'm saying to you, ActionSA must be honest that recommendations do not mean that it's binding.
You quoted a professor or a chairperson a few minutes ago to say that she
Yes.
didn't believe that.
Financial
that's what it means.
the Financial Fiscal Commission chairperson, one of the organizations that the committees would be consulting before the process then starts of the committee, of the standing committee as well as the select committee. So they would have been involved in that process as well. So she speaks from a very informed perspective.
Absolutely. So what we did, as I said, we came up with a pragmatic solution to, rather than delay the budget completely and make it start from the beginning, which would have happened if there was an amendment to the fiscal framework. We came up with a pragmatic solution because the ANC came to us and said, we believe that if we do this, we can find a solution. And we said, right, we will support that solution. And we want to see whether you're really going to put South Africans first. And that's where we are right now. We're going to use the next 30 days to consider submissions from all interested stakeholders and parties to come forward with proposals of how to bridge this divide of 28 billion rand out of a 2 trillion rand budget.
All right. A final one, Athol. This conversation, of course, has also now led to the FedEx of the Democratic Alliance is going to have a conversation around reconsidering whether they stay within the government of national unity or what happens going forward. From ActionSA side, are you willing to join the government of national unity?
You know, we took a decision a year ago that we wouldn't join the government of national unity because they were a 70% government and big enough. And there was a new bloc of opposition calling themselves the Progressive Caucus, stroke Regressive Caucus. So we took a decision that we would best operate as a fulcrum between those two big blocs. If the DA pulls out or gets kicked out of the government of national unity and goes into opposition, then the opposition space is going to be really crowded because the DA is very good in opposition. MK have proven to be weak in opposition. So we would then have to reassess where would we best fit. And under the situation that you describe, if they leave or get kicked out, we would have to reconsider where we as ActionSA can make our best contribution, yes.
Could it be the regressive caucus, as you put it, or would it be the government of national unity?
We would have to sit as a party and make a decision, unlikely to be part of the regressive caucus, because we didn't choose that in the first place.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Athol Trollip is the Chief Whip of ActionSA. This is following yesterday's voting on the fiscal framework for 2025.